Don't you dare touch that tray. The cafeteria manager snatched the tray out of the girl's hands and wiped her gloves like she'd just touched something filthy. You people sneaking into the wrong line like hungry little rats. Every single day. She stepped closer. Section C. That's where people like you eat. Not here. The girl held up her student ID. Ma'am, I already paid my tuition. The woman's mouth curled into a thin, mocking smile. People like you don't pay for anything. Now get out of my line before you contaminate every plate back there. The girl said nothing. Behind her, a man froze mid-sentence, his jaw locking tight. It was his daughter. Who was he? And what he was about to do would turn an entire university upside down. Let me tell you about the man standing in that doorway. Nathaniel Reeves grew up in Detroit. Michigan, not the Detroit you see on postcards. The Detroit, where fireworks and gunfire sounded the same on the 4th of July. Where the stairwell of his apartment building smelled like mildew and menthol cigarettes every single day of his childhood. His father worked the loading dock at an auto parts plant for 26 years. His mother taught 4th grade at a public school with broken window units that never cooled anything. Combined, they never cleared $37,500 in a single year. But every night, his mother sat at the kitchen table with Nathaniel and his older brother, Malcolm, and made them read out loud until the streetlights clicked on outside. Malcolm was the smart one. Everybody said so. He wanted to be a surgeon. He had the grades. He had the mind. He didn't have the time. Malcolm was diagnosed with leukemia at 10. He died at 11. Nathaniel was 8. He remembers standing in a hospital hallway staring at the floor, thinking, why didn't anyone catch it sooner? That question never left him. At 18, Nathaniel enlisted in the U.S. Army. Not because he wanted to fight, because he wanted to pay for college without burying his parents under debt. 4 years of service. 2 deployments overseas. A scar along his right forearm from shrapnel he never talks about. Then Case Western Reserve on the GI Bill. Molecular biology. Top of his class. Then a rented garage lab outside Austin, Texas, a folding table, a second-hand centrifuge, and one obsession, pediatric cancer therapeutics. The kind of medicine that might have saved Malcolm. That garage became Reeves Genomics. Today, it trades on the Nasdaq. A market cap of $3.6 billion, 268 employees, 9 drugs in active clinical trials, 5 already extending children's lives across 17 countries. Nathaniel Reeves built every inch of it with his hands. His mind. And a dead brother's name carved somewhere under his ribs. 2 years ago, his wife Camille collapsed in their Chicago kitchen. Brain aneurysm. She was 41. By the time paramedics arrived, she was gone. After the funeral, Nathaniel couldn't cook in that kitchen anymore. Couldn't look at the chair where she used to sit grading her students' essays. Camille had taught history at a community college. He couldn't sleep in their bed anymore. So he sold the house and took Zora, his 18-year-old daughter, to Colorado. Zora was the girl who had just stood in that lunch line and said nothing while a grown woman called her a rat. Zora had earned her spot at Barrow University on pure merit, an SAT score in the top 1%. A co-authored paper on immunotherapy, published before she'd even walked at graduation. Every inch of her acceptance was hers. But she carried one secret she'd told absolutely nobody on campus. Her father was one of the university's largest prospective donors. His foundation had spent months in talks with the board of trustees about a $9.8 million endowment, a new research center that would carry her mother's name. Zora didn't want anyone to know. She wanted to prove she belonged there on her own, with no last name attached. No foundation. No billion-dollar cushion underneath her. So she stayed quiet. Even when Deborah Krantz started singling her out during the first week of the semester. Even when it happened again the second week. And the third. And every week that followed. She never told her father, because she didn't want him to think she was fragile. She thought if she reported it, people would say the rich man's daughter was being dramatic. so she carried it alone. Week after week, that particular Tuesday morning, Nathaniel had flown in from Chicago at 5:30 a.m. His helicopter touched down on Barrow's private airfield at 6:40. By 7:30, he was seated in a glass-walled boardroom on the 5th floor of the administration building, shaking hands with the board of trustees. The morning session ran smoothly. Budget lines got approved. Architectural renderings were praised. The endowment was nearly finalized. Everybody smiled. Everybody shook hands twice. At noon, the board broke for lunch. The trustees filed toward the faculty dining room, white tablecloths, sparkling water, seared trout. Nathaniel declined. He told the board chair he needed some air. The truth was simpler than that. He hadn't seen his daughter in almost a month. He missed her. He wanted to surprise her. Sit across from her in the cafeteria like an ordinary father. Eat whatever she was eating. Ask about her classes. He didn't call ahead. He didn't text. He walked down 4 flights of stairs, followed the signage to the main dining hall, pushed through the glass door, and heard a woman call his daughter a rat. Nathaniel didn't move for 4 full seconds. 4 seconds is nothing in an ordinary life. But in a moment like that one, 4 seconds is long enough to feel every muscle in your body lock tight. Long enough to hear your own pulse in your ears. Long enough to decide exactly what kind of man you're going to be for the next 5 minutes. He watched Deborah Krantz lean across the counter, her latex gloves still on. Her face twisted into the kind of sneer that doesn't come from a single bad day. It comes from decades of believing certain people are simply less than others. And on the other side of that counter, holding an empty tray with both hands, was Zora. His Zora. The girl who used to fall asleep on his chest during thunderstorms. The girl who read her first, published abstract out loud to him at their kitchen table at 16. Voice cracking on every 3rd word. The girl who held his hand at her mother's funeral and whispered, "I've got you, Dad." That girl was standing in a lunch line being told she didn't belong. Nathaniel scanned the room before he moved. He needed the whole picture first. To his left, a line of roughly 55 students stretched down the serving counter. Most of them were staring. A handful already had phones out. One boy near the front, tall, black, wearing a lacrosse hoodie, had taken a half step toward Zora like he meant to intervene. That was Malik Hendricks, Zora's friend. Zora shook her head at him. A tiny motion. "Don't." Behind the counter, 2 kitchen staffers, both Filipino, stood frozen at their stations. Eyes fixed on the floor tile. The body language of people who'd watched this exact scene before and learned a long time ago that speaking up only made things worse for them. To the right, 4 tables of students had gone completely silent. Forks down. Conversation dead. A freckled girl with her hair in a braid, Zora's roommate. Claire had both hands pressed over her mouth, and at the center of it all stood Deborah Krantz. Arms crossed. One hip cocked against the steel counter. Looking at Zora the way someone looks at a stain on an otherwise clean shirt. Nathaniel crossed the cafeteria. His shoes made almost no sound against the linoleum. Army training doesn't leave your body. You learn to move quietly. You learn to control your breathing. You learn that the most dangerous man in any room is rarely the loudest one. He stopped 4 feet from the counter and set his hand gently on Zora's shoulder, the way you touch someone to let them know they're no longer alone. Zora flinched, then turned. Her eyes went wide. "Dad, what are you doing here?" her voice cracked. The same crack from the kitchen table 2 years earlier. Except this time it wasn't nerves over a research paper. It was shame, the kind that comes from being caught in a moment you've been hiding from the one person you love most. Nathaniel looked at her, but didn't answer the question. Not yet. Instead, he turned to Deborah Krantz. "Excuse me. I'm her father. I'd like to understand what's happening here." His voice stayed level, no heat. "No volume." Just the calm, measured register of a man who has sat across boardroom tables from senators and generals. Deborah looked at him. And here is the moment that mattered. This is where everything could have gone differently. If Deborah Krantz had looked at this man and simply seen a human being, if she'd said, I'm sorry. There's been a misunderstanding. If she'd handed the tray back and checked the system, but she didn't. She looked at Nathaniel Reeves exactly the way she'd looked at his daughter. Exactly the way she looked at every black person who crossed her line. She saw the plain blazer with no tie. No entourage. No watch flashing at his wrist. None of the power signals she'd trained herself to recognize. She saw a black man. That was enough. Sir. She lifted her chin. Parents and visitors aren't permitted in the serving area. If you have questions about your daughter's financial situation, the financial aid office is in the administration building. Second floor. They open at 9. Financial aid. Nathaniel let that land. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. I'm not here about finances. I'm here about the way you just spoke to my child. Deborah uncrossed her arms, planted both hands flat on the counter, and leaned forward. The fluorescent panel above her buzzed like trapped insects. Sir, I don't appreciate your tone. Her voice climbed, deliberately louder now, performing. Not for Nathaniel, but for the staff behind her, the students watching, anyone who might question her authority later. We have standards here. We have systems. Maybe wherever you're used to. People just walk in and demand whatever they want. But this is Barrow University. She let the school's name hang in the air like it meant something sacred. And I've run this dining hall for 23 years. So I suggest you lower your voice. Collect your daughter. And use the side exit. Quietly. Nathaniel didn't lower anything. Didn't raise anything either. I'd like your name and title. Please. Excuse me, your name and your title. I'm making a formal inquiry. Deborah's left eye twitched once the first crack in the mask. I don't have to give you anything. Then I'd like to speak with your supervisor. She laughed. A short, dry sound like a branch snapping underfoot. Honey, I am the supervisor. I run this entire operation. Have for 23 years. And in 23 years, nobody has ever walked into my cafeteria and spoken to me the way you just did. She leaned in close enough that Nathaniel could smell coffee on her breath. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave. Or I will have you removed. Nathaniel didn't move. I'd like my daughter to receive the hot meal my family has already paid for. Full tuition. Full meal plan. No financial aid. No scholarship paid in full. And I'd like it served to her at this counter. The same counter you serve every other student at. Deborah stared at him. Nostrils flaring. Jaw tight. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice machine humming 2 rooms away. Then she reached under the counter and hit a button. A radio crackled to life. Static popped. And Deborah spoke into it with the exaggerated calm of a woman who had already decided who the villain was. Security. This is Krantz in the dining hall. I have an unidentified male in the serving area. Confrontational. Refusing to leave. I need assistance immediately. She set the radio down, looked at Nathaniel, and smiled. Let's see how this goes for you. 40 seconds later, the side door swung open. Officer Denise Park walked in mid-40s. Campus security uniform. Radio clipped to her hip. She scanned the room fast. Zora standing rigid. Nathaniel with his hands visible at his sides. Deborah behind the counter. Arms crossed again. Park had worked campus security for 11 years. She'd handled noise complaints, dorm lockouts, parking disputes. She'd never once drawn her taser. She was good at reading a room. And this room wasn't reading right. But Deborah was already crossing to her, whispering fast, loud enough for Nathaniel to catch fragments. Not a registered parent walked right in aggressive. I feel threatened. Might not even be her father. Park looked at Nathaniel. Sir, can I see some identification? Please. Nathaniel reached into his blazer slowly. Deliberately. The way black men in this country learn to move around anyone in uniform. And handed over his driver's license without a word. Park checked it. Radioed it in. The response came back clean. No warrants. No record. Not even a parking ticket. He's clean, Park said. Half to herself, Deborah was already shaking her head. That doesn't prove anything. Anyone can carry an ID. Look at him. Does he look like he belongs here? Park paused. Something shifted in her expression, a tiny frown. The beginning of doubt. Not about Nathaniel, about the woman standing beside her, but Deborah pressed harder. She always pressed harder. I saw him reach across the counter earlier. He could have pocketed something. I want his bag checked. She pointed at the oxblood leather messenger bag on Nathaniel's shoulder. Open it. Park turned to Nathaniel, visibly uncomfortable, her hand resting on her radio. Not her taser, a good sign. But her mouth said what Deborah wanted it to say. Sir, would you mind if I looked in your bag? The cafeteria held its breath. Nathaniel looked at Park, then at Deborah, then at the dozens of phones already recording from every angle of the room. No, he said. I do not consent to a search. There's no probable cause. No warrant. This is my personal property. Calm. Clear. Each word set down like a brick. Park nodded. Legally. She had nothing to push with. She knew it. Nathaniel knew it. But Deborah Krantz didn't care about the law. Deborah cared about winning. In 23 years at Barrow, she had never once lost a confrontation with someone who looked like Nathaniel Reeves. She moved fast, came around the end of the counter, and grabbed the messenger bag straight off Nathaniel's shoulder. Hard enough that the strap burned a line across his collarbone. Zora shouted, "Don't touch him." Park stepped forward. Deborah. Wait. Too late. Deborah already had the bag on the counter, unzipping it with both hands. The sound tore through the cafeteria like a scream. She started pulling items out, slamming each one onto the steel surface for the whole room to see. A laptop. Space grey, she barely glanced at it. A leather portfolio in deep oxblood. Embossed in silver letters, Reeves Genomics. Deborah didn't read it. Didn't care. An army challenge coin. Heavy pewter, she flipped it over like a bottle cap and tossed it back onto the counter. Metal rang against steel. Zora flinched. Malik flinched. Claire covered her mouth. A bound document. 61 pages. Its cover reading, Endowment Agreement, Camille Reeves, Center for Molecular Medicine. Barrow University. Jiomeyuan. Barbet. Ling ling ling. Deborah flipped through 3 pages without reading a word and tossed it aside like junk mail. Nothing here. She announced. Loud. Theatrical. But that doesn't mean I trust him. She wiped her hands on her apron, the same gesture as before, as if contact with anything belonging to a black man required decontamination. Nathaniel looked at the challenge coin lying on the counter, the coin he'd carried in his pocket the day Malcolm died. The day Zora was born. The day he buried Camille, now resting beside a ketchup dispenser and a stack of paper napkins. He picked it up and slid it into his blazer pocket. The only thing trembling was his hand. He said nothing. Malik Hendricks was still filming. Hassanal hands shaking. Camera, steady. 9 minutes of unbroken footage. 2 other students filmed from different angles. The cafeteria had become a courtroom. Every phone was a piece of evidence. Deborah didn't notice the phones. She was already moving to the next phase, positioning herself directly between Nathaniel and Zora. Arms spread, palms flat on the steel, a human wall between a father and his daughter. I want everyone in this cafeteria to know. She projected, her voice reaching every corner of the room, that I am acting in the interest of student safety. I do not feel safe with this man in our facility. I asked him to leave. He refused. I called security. He refused to cooperate. Then she turned to Zora, locked eyes with her. Voice not softer, but sharper. The way a blade gets sharper when you press it at an angle. And you? She pointed a gloved finger at Zora's chest. Sit down. The adults are handling this now. You should be grateful this university even lets you sit in this room at all. Do you hear me, grateful? Not every school is this generous with people like you. Grateful. The word hung in the room like smoke after a gunshot. As if Zora's seat were a gift that could be revoked at any moment. As if her presence were charity. As if her flawless grades and published research and a top 1% SAT score and a family paying full tuition in cash meant absolutely nothing because her skin was the wrong color for the main line. Zora didn't sit down. Didn't cry. She stood perfectly still. But something behind her eyes broke the quiet kind of break. Where a person stops believing the world will ever be fair, no matter how hard they try. No matter how well they behave. Claire rushed over and grabbed Zora's arm. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is completely insane." An older man sitting at a corner table, grey-haired. Tweed jacket had watched the entire scene without a word. Dr. Walter Ingram. Tenured professor of constitutional law. When Deborah said grateful, he stood, picked up his coffee, and walked out through the faculty entrance. In the hallway he pulled out his phone and made a single call. That call mattered, just not yet. Deborah grabbed the radio again and called for a second officer. Now 2 uniforms stood near the entrance, Officer Park and a younger man named Officer Mott, both looking increasingly uneasy. Deborah marched over to them, ticking off accusations on her fingers like a checklist she'd memorized long ago. "I want a formal incident report filed right now. This man entered a restricted area without authorization. He was confrontational. He refused a search. He created a hostile environment. I want his name flagged in the campus security system. I want him permanently banned from this campus." She pointed at Nathaniel without turning around. "Escort him off the property. Now." Park shifted her weight, looked at Nathaniel still standing. Hands visible. Eyes steady then at Deborah. Pacing. Gesturing wildly. Voice climbing higher with every sentence. Park had worked security, 11 years. She knew what a real threat looked like. And she knew what a performance looked like. This was a performance. But Deborah had 23 years of institutional weight behind her. She sat on the staff safety committee. She had the ear of every administrator in the building. Crossing her had consequences. And Park knew that better than most. Park took a breath. "Mr. Reeves, I think it's best if you step into the hallway with me while we sort this out." Nathaniel nodded once. He turned to Zora, every phone in the room still trained on him, and his voice softened. Purely fatherly now. "Sweetheart, I'm right here. You did nothing wrong. Not one thing. Eat your lunch. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Zora's lip trembled. She nodded. Nathaniel pulled out his phone and sent 2 messages. Fast and precise. First, to Monica Feld. Chief Legal Counsel, freeze every contract linked to Barrow University across the entire portfolio, including the foundation endowment. Effective immediately. Second, to Dean Preston Barrow, come to the dining hall now. He slid the phone into his pocket and followed Officer Park toward the hallway, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum. Behind him, the cafeteria erupted in whispers. Deborah Krantz didn't hear them. She was too busy smiling, straightening her apron, turning to the nearest kitchen worker, a young black woman who'd been staring at the floor the entire time and saying, loud enough for every table to hear, "Say, that's how you handle them. 23 years. Never failed once." In the hallway, Park walked beside Nathaniel in silence for roughly 12 steps, then stopped and lowered her voice. "Mr. Reeves, between you and me, that was wrong. Everything that happened in there was wrong. I knew it the second I walked in." Nathaniel looked at her. "How often does she do this?" Park stared at the floor tiles for a long pause. Then, "You're not the first person to ask me that." Footsteps behind them. Zora had followed. Malik right beside her. Phone still recording. Zora's voice came out small in the way that has nothing to do with volume and everything to do with how much a person has been carrying alone. "Dad, I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it. But she does this every week. Not just to me, to Malik. To every black student who uses the main line. She sends us to Section C every single time. Malik nodded. She calls it sorting. Says it's policy. There is no policy. Sir. Nathaniel looked at his daughter. His eyes went red for the first time all day, not from anger, but from the specific pain a father feels discovering his child has been suffering quietly to spare him worry. He didn't speak. He just set his hand on her shoulder again. The same gesture from the cafeteria, but heavier this time. Weighted with everything he wished he'd known weeks earlier. At the end of the hallway, the elevator chimed. Steel doors slid open. Dean Preston Barrows stepped out. Still in the same navy suit from the morning meeting. His face the colour of old paper. Hands trembling from whatever he'd read on the ride down. He looked at Nathaniel, the man he'd called our most important strategic partner 3 hours earlier, and understood the ground beneath his career had just cracked open. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What happened?" He was already sweating through his dress shirt. He looked at Nathaniel. Then Zora. Then Malik. Still holding his phone up like a shield. "Someone tell me what happened." Barrow said. "Right now." Park spoke first, keeping it short. "Factual. A cafeteria supervisor had denied a student her meal. The student's father had intervened. The supervisor had called security, accused the father of trespassing, and physically seized his personal belongings in front of the entire dining hall. The father had cooperated fully. The supervisor had not. Barrow listened, his face going paler with each sentence. Then he turned to Nathaniel and, for the first time since stepping out of that elevator, actually looked at him, not at the blazer, not at the visitor badge clipped to his pocket, at the man. "Mr. Reeves," Barrow said slowly, choosing every word like he was walking through a minefield. "I want you to know that whatever happened in that cafeteria does not represent this university." Nathaniel just looked at him. "You were in a boardroom with me 3 hours ago. You shook my hand. You called me your most important strategic partner. You showed me architectural drawings of a building that would carry my dead wife's name." He paused. "And while you were pouring me coffee upstairs, your employee was downstairs telling my daughter she should be grateful. You even let her sit in your cafeteria." Barrow opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Zora spoke. Quiet, but clear. "Dean Barrow. This wasn't the first time. She does this every week. She has a system. She calls it sorting. Black students go to Section C. White students stay on the main line. There's no policy that says any of this. She made it up. And nobody stopped her." Barrow looked like a man watching his own house burn from the inside. "I didn't know," he whispered. "That's the problem." Nathaniel said, "You didn't know. Or you didn't look." He let that sit for 3 full seconds, then spoke again. "Here's what's going to happen. You and I are going to walk back into that cafeteria together. You're going to address what happened in front of the same students who watched it happen. And your employee is going to be removed from this campus today. Not next week. Not after a review. Today." Barrow started to protest. "Mr. Reeves, perhaps we should handle this privately. I can schedule a meeting with Human Resources and the legal team." "And we can." "She handled it publicly," Nathaniel said. "She humiliated my daughter publicly. She called security on me publicly. She searched my belongings publicly. In front of 300 students with phones. So no. We're not handling this in a conference room." Barrow closed his mouth. They walked back, all of them. Nathaniel first. Barrow half a step behind. Zora and Malik and Park following. The cafeteria was still packed. Nobody had left. Every student was either staring at their phone or at the door. The room smelled like cold food and nervous energy. Trays sat untouched. Conversation dead. Deborah Krantz stood behind the counter wiping down a station. Humming. Relaxed, a woman who believed the problem had been solved and order had been restored. Then the door opened. Barrow walked in first. The room went dead silent. 300 students holding their breath at once. Deborah looked up. saw the dean, straightened her posture, started to smile. Then she saw Nathaniel right behind him, walking back into the room she'd thrown him out of. The smile didn't just disappear. It collapsed, layer by layer. Like a building coming down in slow motion, Barrow spoke, his voice shaking but carrying to every corner of the room. Mrs. Krantz, this is Mr. Nathaniel Reeves. He serves on our board of advisory trustees. He is the father of Zora Reeves, a student here who pays full tuition. He is the founder and CEO of Reeves Genomics, a $3.6 billion company. His foundation is finalizing a $9.8 million endowment for this university. And his company is the leading candidate for the food service contract that currently pays your salary. He paused, letting every word settle into the silence like stones dropped into still water. You will apologize to Mr. Reeves and to his daughter immediately. And then you will accompany me to my office, where you will be suspended pending a formal investigation. Effective right now. Every phone in the cafeteria went up. Every camera recorded. Red lights blinked like dozens of tiny witnesses. Deborah grabbed the edge of the counter, knuckles going white. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Nathaniel stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You know the saddest part, if you'd just been kind to my daughter, not because of who I am, just because she's a human being standing in your line, you would still have your job tomorrow. You'd still have your contract. You'd still have everything. But you chose different. The cafeteria was so quiet you could hear the ventilation fans spinning 3 floors up. Deborah's legs buckled slightly. She held the counter to keep herself upright. And for the first time in 23 years, she had absolutely nothing to say. She finally found her voice. It came out cracked, tangled, like something dragged out of a drain. Mr. Reeves, I had no idea who you were. If I'd known, I never would have. This is all just a misunderstanding. I was following procedure. And Nathaniel cut her off. Not with volume, with precision. That's the entire problem. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat my daughter like a human being. You shouldn't have to Google someone before deciding whether they deserve a hot meal. A teacher 3 tables away covered her mouth. 2 students in the back started clapping, then stopped. Unsure whether it was appropriate, Deborah tried again. Tears now. Real or performed. Impossible to tell after 23 years of practice blurring the line. I was just doing my job. I've been here 23 years. Ask anyone. I care about these students. I care about all of them. Zora stepped forward. She didn't shout. Didn't cry. She spoke the way a person speaks when they've held something inside for months and finally decided to set it down. There is no policy that separates students by line. Mrs. Krantz. I checked. I went to the Student Affairs office my 2nd week and asked for the dining handbook. There is no Section A. There is no Section C. You made it up. And you used it to humiliate every black student who walked through that door. The cafeteria erupted, not in applause. In sound. Gasps. Whispers. A few students saying yes out loud. One girl at a corner table was crying. Malik held his phone higher, making sure every word was captured. Deborah scanned the room for an ally. She looked at the kitchen staff. They wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at Officer Park. Park looked away. She looked at Barrow, who was already reading from a paper he'd pulled from his jacket. Mrs. Krantz, Barrow said, his voice steadier now, as though reading something official gave him a spine he didn't normally have. You are hereby suspended from your position as Director of Dining Services. Effective immediately. With pay, pending a full investigation into your conduct. You are to leave this campus within the hour. Officer Park will escort you. Deborah's mouth moved with no sound. She untied her apron with shaking hands, folded it, and set it on the counter the way someone folds a flag at a funeral. Then she walked toward the side exit. passing the kitchen staff on her way out, 5 workers who had worked under her for years. Watched her sort students. Heard every comment. Said nothing because she controlled their schedules, their shifts, their evaluations. Not one of them looked at her as she passed. As Park walked Deborah through the side door, one student, a boy in a faded ball cap, said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. 23 years too long. The door closed behind her. Something shifted in the room. The tension didn't vanish. It changed shape. From anger into something softer. Something that needed repair. Nathaniel walked behind the serving counter. Nobody stopped him. He picked up a clean tray, moved down the line, and placed items on it himself. Grilled chicken, reach, steamed vegetables, a carton of chocolate milk. He carried the tray to Zora and set it down in front of her. "Eat your lunch. Sweetheart," he said. "You earned your seat here every single day." Zora looked at the tray, then at her father. Then she sat and ate. Nathaniel turned to face the cafeteria. 300 students. Dozens of phones. Total silence. If anyone in this room has ever been made to feel the way my daughter was made to feel today, I want you to hear me. It was never your fault. It was never about you. And it will not happen here again. I'm going to make sure of that. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then one person clapped. Then 5. Then 20. Then the whole cafeteria was on its feet, the applause rough, uneven, full of something that had been held back a very long time. Zora looked up at her father through the noise and, for the first time that day, smiled. That afternoon, Monica Feld landed on campus like a storm in a tailored suit. Nathaniel had called her from the hallway at 12:45. By 2 o'clock, she was standing in the dean's office with a forensic data team, a subpoena, and the kind of calm expression that made lawyers across the table start sweating before she even opened her mouth. Monica didn't ask permission. She presented the subpoena and her team went to work. They pulled the cafeteria surveillance footage, 5 cameras, audio enabled, 130 days of archived recordings. They pulled Deborah Krantz's full personnel file. They pulled every formal complaint filed by a student or parent of color over the previous 6 years. And they pulled the meal plan database, every transaction, every modification, every manual override. Going back 4 full years, what they found made even Nathaniel go quiet. Over 6 years, 17 Black and Latino students and parents had filed formal complaints about Deborah Krantz. 13 of those complaints had been buried by the previous administration filed. Stampede. Forgotten. 4 families had never received any response at all. 6 students had transferred out of Barrow entirely, citing hostile dining conditions in their exit interviews. Nobody had followed up. Nobody had asked why, but the meal plan data was worse. Deborah had been manually overriding the system. 19 Black and Latino students had their meal plans quietly downgraded over the past 4 years, full tuition, full meal plan, but flagged in the system as scholarship or financial aid recipients. Not one white student had ever been reclassified. Not a single one. The pattern was so clean it looked like official policy. But there was no policy. There never had been. Deborah Krantz had built an entire private system of segregation inside a university cafeteria, one keystroke at a time. Zora's card had been flagged on her 3rd day at Barrow. That evening, Malik Hendricks uploaded his 9-minute video without a caption. He didn't need one. The footage spoke for itself. Within 12 hours it had 8 million views. Within 48 hours, 27 million. The hashtag Barrow Exposed was trending in every state in the country. Renata Cole saw the video on a Wednesday night, sitting in her living room in Fort Collins, scrolling her phone, when she saw a woman in a cafeteria uniform pointing a gloved finger at a black girl. And her stomach dropped because she'd seen that finger before. 2 years earlier, Renata's son Andre had been a sophomore at Barrow. Deborah Krantz had accused him of stealing a meal card. He hadn't stolen anything, the card was his, but Deborah had called security. had him escorted out of the dining hall, and filed a report that landed in his permanent student file. Andre stopped eating in the cafeteria after that. He lost 18 pounds in 2 months. He transferred at the end of the semester and never told his mother the full story until she saw that video and finally asked. Renata called Monica Feld the next morning. Within a week, 7 more families came forward. Within 2 weeks, 13. The Nathaniel Reeves Foundation funded every single family's legal representation. Nathaniel made one statement to the press. Just one. This is not about my daughter. This is about every student who was ever made to feel small in a room where they belonged. The story caught fire. Leah Whitcomb, an investigative reporter at the Denver Courier, published a 3-part series titled Behind the Counter, documenting 6 years of complaints, cover-ups, and institutional silence. National outlets picked it up within hours. Cable news ran the cafeteria footage on a loop. Editorial boards from coast to coast called for reform. Barrow University's applications for the following year dropped 27% in 3 weeks. Donors pulled pledges. Alumni wrote open letters. The student government passed a unanimous vote of no confidence in the administration. Dean Preston Barrow resigned within a month. He didn't give a press conference. He sent a 1-paragraph email to the faculty list serve at 11 p.m. on a Sunday and was gone by Monday morning. The Board of Trustees appointed an interim leader, Dr. Adaeze Bello, a black educator with nearly 3 decades of experience in higher education equity. Her first act was commissioning a full external audit of every department on campus. Her second act was walking through the dining hall at lunch, shaking hands with students, and eating a tray of grilled chicken at a table by the window. The Colorado Attorney General's office opened a formal civil rights investigation. Deborah Krantz was charged with assault for physically seizing Nathaniel Reeves's bag. She was charged with unlawful restraint for blocking Zora's access to the meal line. The charges carried a hate crime enhancement based on the documented 6-year pattern of racially targeted conduct uncovered in the surveillance archive and the meal plan database. The civil suit filed on behalf of 13 families settled for $21.4 million from the university's insurance carrier. A separate personal judgment of $675,000 was entered against Deborah Krantz individually. On the day of trial, Judge Priscilla Vance presided. Deborah took the stand. She said she didn't see color. She said she only saw behavior. She said she'd been misunderstood. The prosecution played 19 audio clips, pulled from the cafeteria recordings. 6 years of Deborah Krantz's voice caught on camera, saying the same things to different faces. The same sorting. The same sneer. The same finger pointed at the same kind of student. The jury watched Malik's 9-minute video in full. Nobody in the courtroom moved. The verdict came back in under 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, 30 months in state custody. Suspended to 18 months of supervised probation given her age. Mandatory completion of a civil rights education program. A permanent ban from working in any role involving students or minors. And full restitution to every affected family. Judge Vance spoke directly to Deborah before closing the case. What you did was not enforcement of any policy. It was cruelty, systematic, deliberate, and protected by the silence of an institution that chose comfort over justice. That silence ends today. In the gallery, Renata Cole sat with her son Andre beside her. She didn't clap when the verdict was read. She just held her son's hand and said quietly, 6 years too late. 6 months later, the cafeteria looked like a different place entirely. New artwork lined the walls, student photography from every culture represented on campus. A banner near the entrance read, "Every seat belongs to everyone." The kitchen had a completely new leadership team. A new director of dining services, Elena Castillo, had been hired from outside the university. She learned every student worker's name by the end of her first week. She started a tradition called Family Friday, where parents were invited to eat lunch alongside their kids once a month. Barrow University now had a permanent office of equity and inclusion staffed by 3 full-time professionals. Mandatory bias training was required for every employee on campus. Dr. Ada Isabello, confirmed as permanent Vice President of Student Affairs, had personally rewritten the Staff Conduct Handbook from cover to cover. Zora co-founded a student program called Common Ground, pairing incoming freshmen, especially students of color and first-generation students, with upperclassmen mentors who helped them navigate everything from dining hall logistics to how to file a complaint when something went wrong. By the end of its first semester, the program had 48 mentors. The Nathaniel Reeves Foundation finalized its endowment on new terms, $18 million, funding 40 full tuition scholarships for students of color from the Denver and Aurora public school systems, permanently renewable. Named the Nathaniel Reeves Legacy Scholarship. Andrew Cole, Renata's son, reapplied to Barrow and was accepted. On his first day back on campus, Zora met him at the dining hall entrance with a mentor badge and a tray already waiting at a table by the window. Malik Hendricks became president of the Black Student Union. His 9-minute video had been viewed over 33 million times. He never took it down. On a Friday afternoon in October, Nathaniel Reeves stood at the back of the cafeteria. Same room, same linoleum floor, same fluorescent lights humming overhead. But everything else was different. The noise was different. The energy was different. The faces behind the counter were different. Zora sat at a table in the middle of the room, surrounded by friends of every background, arguing about a molecular biology assignment and laughing so hard one of them knocked over a carton of orange juice. Zora grabbed a napkin and cleaned it up without missing a beat. Elena Castillo walked over to Nathaniel. Mr. Reeves, would you like to join the line for Family Friday? We have grilled chicken today. Nathaniel smiled, picked up a tray, and stood in line like every other parent. Served himself. He could have done 100 things differently, written a check and walked away. Pulled Zora out and sent her somewhere else. Let the lawyers handle everything from a comfortable distance. Instead, he kept showing up. Week after week. Friday after Friday. Because showing up is what actually changes a place. Not money. Not power. Not headlines. Presence. Dignity isn't something a student should have to earn by having the right parents or the right bank account. People like Deborah Krantz don't survive because they're powerful. They survive because everyone around them stays silent. The teachers who look away. The security officers who follow orders without asking questions. The administrators who bury complaints because fixing them is inconvenient. When just one person refuses to stay quiet, the whole system falls apart. You don't need a $3 billion company to stop a Deborah Krantz. You need a phone, a witness, and the willingness to say that is not okay. Loud and clear. In the room where it happened. So here's my question for you. If you'd walked into that cafeteria as a stranger and heard what Nathaniel heard, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up? Stepped forward? Pulled out your phone? Or would you have told yourself it wasn't your business? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit you somewhere real, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because the next Deborah is already out there. The only question is who's going to be standing in the doorway.